Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NIGP webinar, Lead Laterally, Choose to Help, presented by Richard Pennington with special guests, Jack Pellegrino and Susan Weeder.
Some time ago, I was just pondering about the whole idea of leadership and where people learn how to lead. And it really brought me to this organization. And the really good part about the procurement profession, at least, is that you touch so many parts of organizations that I really call them part of the circulatory system. You know, I'm delighted today to have a couple what I call stars of the profession. One is Sue Weeder, who's going to be joining us by audio, but I'll try to use liberal use of her picture so that we can get a little eye contact when she's speaking. Sue is the property and contracts coordinator from Montrose, Colorado, on the western slope. She's now working for the regional airport, Montrose County. And she was formerly the county procurement and contracts administrator. Sue and I will be joined by Jack Pellegrino. Jack is the director of purchasing and contracting from San Diego County. He was or is the 2001 president of the California Association of Public Procurement Officials, CAPO. So welcome both Jack and Sue, and we'll all be hearing from you. So thanks for joining us. Sue and Jack were preceded by some other stars that helped us learn about creating excellence, learning from great procurement teams. NIGP decided to create this series based on my book, Seeing Excellence. We started with a story about multifunction machine consolidation in the state of Ohio. We moved through 9 months talking about the life cycle of teams, expanding the team's thinking in terms of keeping purpose in mind and learning from the stars and how to do team development, practicing the art of the question. Moved into focusing the team's attention, some basic concepts of project management and measurement, process analysis, root cause analysis, and decision making. And we ended with 2 sessions on sustaining the team's efforts, risk, and change management, and making learning stick. In fact, our last guest was Laura Shelters, the director of NIGP content and research. We talk about dimensions of leadership. You know, we can start all the way from the transactional, work up to what we call transformational leadership. I mean, transactional leadership is often, let's say when somebody comes to you and asks for just some help learning how to use a spreadsheet, for example, or some kind of technology, that's typically a fairly transactional relationship in terms of one person leading the other. When you have a large organization like a country, for example, obviously the dimensions of leadership go much higher or are much larger. And what we're going to do in the through line here is that the things that you learn in team leadership, which many of us do, and in fact, many of us will never do anything other than lead in small groups, committees, for example, or in teams. I didn't have a larger organization greater than 15 until I was I think 45 or 50, and I had a group. The largest I had was 70, but there are differences, and we'll talk a little bit about scaling up leadership challenges and how that is different. We're going to be right in the center here a little bit on lateral leadership, and just to let you know that I think we're all sensitive here on the panel, and I think, as you all know, that there are different dimensions. But what we're going to prove is that the things that you learn in teams are always going to suit you well. I mean, they're necessary. I was at the National Association of State Procurement Officials because I happened to be a life member at the time. I'd been a state director in Colorado, and we were watching a presentation by a young man. His name was Thomas Lindley. And Thomas was talking about a project that he'd had when he first came in. He was a new buyer in the Department of Administrative Services in Ohio. They had an intern one summer, and they seized on an opportunity. And there was a question they asked, and the question was, can we save money from trying to aggregate this? And if you've been around this issue, you know that there's panic that sets in. And because don't take my printer, I know was a common cry when I was even in the Air Force and before state procurement. And Thomas and his intern came up with a great plan. And the plan was they tackled what essentially was a change management challenge with a team of two, talked to their organization. The chief procurement officer in Ohio came up with an idea for a pilot plan. And the pilot exercise of the test pilot they were going to use was going to be select a department that happened to be their own, and also find a local government that was willing to jump in and run a test. And the numbers on this are over on the right-hand side. They demonstrated through the pilot that they could achieve significant savings, and they got people comfortable with the idea that, you know what, there's a lot of upsides to this. One of the things we don't have to do now is source different suppliers for these different kinds of machines and train people on how to use them. That was always frustrating for me. And they saw a lot of the upsides and were willing through the pilot to demonstrate that were tangible cost savings for this. And they implemented it. And as I recall, when they got done with this statewide, they had about 2 million in terms of what they could document in savings across the state. You know, the better part of this, other than just the achievement, was a couple things that I recall Thomas Lindley telling me. And one of those was that the agency is your customer, and we are their consultants. And what a great amount of wisdom here. The ability to improve by spotting an opportunity, mapping out a plan, checking on the results, and implementing. That was the first story. And I found it because Thomas got an award by the National Association of State Procurement Officials called the Cronin Award for Innovation. And if any of you have been around quality management systems at all, you'll know that the Deming cycle is really the fundamental approach to identifying problems, planning solutions, doing something to try to fix the issue, solve the gap that exists between expectations and what performance is, and then acting on that. And after you check and see what the results are, and then eventually you set a different standard and you do it again. So it's a never-ending cycle, really. The whole idea of continuous improvement. Well, some years ago, I was after I'd left the law firm, I was out doing some work for consulting on it was then WSCA NASPO, or WSCA, I guess, the Western States Contract Alliance, and they were doing a project on e-procurement, and they were going to do a national cooperative on it, in which they finally didn't award it. And I was running a little side group, a team, to get some local government input to the initiative. And one of the places I went to was the West Slope, and saw Montrose County, a wonderful town that has a historical, it's the Sherman and Ross block, a 1910 block on the main street there. The courthouse is historic, and it's the gateway to, if you've never seen it, it's the Black Canyon. It's gorgeous. And so we were in there talking about procurement cards and how that integrates with things like e-procurement and what the needs are of local governments, and especially the ones that aren't necessarily in a major metropolitan area, and had a nice talk for about a half an hour. And I was walking out of her office and happened to look down at a credenza that was right there as I was exiting, and I saw this. And it was a procurement manual. And I looked at it and said, okay, I know we're done with the official talk, but we've got to talk. What is this? And so I got the story. And it turns out that they were looking for some ways in the county of Montrose to improve the community relations. And to her credit, she was a advocate for the procurement function, and Sue had gone out and been doing some speaking in the community about what she buys, and she'd take pencils and talk about how they bought some things from the hardware store down the street, and showed them pictures of the dump trucks. That was popular, and was surprised at how engaged people were. And she decided to try something. She went to her boss, her name was Ike Holland, and she speaks so highly of Ike, and said, you know, I got an idea. We need a new procurement manual. How about if when we're rewriting that, we do it a little different, and maybe we'll engage some of the kids and try to integrate some of their work into the procurement manual. She went to the other offices that would be involved, the Department of Administrative Services, and said, you know, could we come up with something that isn't going to cost too much, that could be like certificates and things like that we might want to have? And she went to the Department of the Information, the IT department, and said, you know, I'm going to need help. I don't know how to do this and integrate this. Are you on board? And she got everybody was excited by it just by asking and trying to reach out to others. And she went down to the Boys and Girls Club and sort of enlisted some help. Now they got, I think they were 4th to 6th graders. The leaders of that said that, yeah, they'll help with that. And so Sue goes down, and she goes down to have a briefing, and she says, okay, we're going to have an RFP process. It's going to be request for posters. Now there's rules. There's rules now. We're going to set a date, and it can't be late. And I'm going to give you this. We're going to give you envelopes, and it's got to be sealed in the envelope with your name on it. And don't put your last name. We're just going to use your first name. You know, we don't need everybody to know everything about you. And because in our world, if you don't follow those rules, they're not considered. And they had a little discussion about evaluation criteria, things like originality and color. And these are kids now, 4th to 6th. And she got the call. They came in on time. And she got down and started talking to the kids and collected
Richard?
these things. Yeah.
I was going to say, yes, the Boys and Girls Club, it's an after-school program for kids, and this was a great way for us to engage the community and with something positive, because a lot of times, if you go out in the community, you tend to hear a lot of complaints. So this was something where the kids were really interested, and we had most of the kids were about 9 to 14. I think we had a couple kids that were 16. The program actually goes all the way through high school, but anyways, it was very interesting, and you're telling it exactly as it happened.
You mean okay? You mean it's almost all true? That's good. So, and the part of the story I love is, so she went to the administrative services, got some certificates. They had some old frames that weren't used anymore, put them in them. She actually spent some money, I think, to get a little bit of some gift certificates, and went down and when she starts announcing the winners. Tell us that story. I mean, this is the part that sticks with you, I know, is because it kind of blew you away. What happened when you started announcing?
Well, it was really interesting because, of course, we thought that the gift certificates would be the big thing. But, the actual certificate of achievement was beautiful, had a beautiful gold seal on it. And when the kids saw that coming out, and when I would announce a name, they just cheered for each other. And, that was totally unexpected, because I kind of thought that some kids would be maybe a little bit jealous or something like that. But they were truly excited that somebody from their group had actually won. And they cheered each other on, they clapped. They just got very, very excited about the fact that, wow, this is quite an honor. And that I thought was just really interesting.
And I'm flipping through the book here just a little bit now as you talk, Sue, and getting to the part where you actually integrate it into the manual. And so I'm sitting, and this is happening to me now. I'm standing there outside of Sue's office reading all this and just kind of marveling. I mean, I'm not a particularly innovative person, but I'd never seen it quite this creative. I'd never seen, for example, a heart in a procurement manual. I believe that's the first time I'd ever actually seen that. And so I'm kind of going through it, making my way through, and got really, I think it was the last page. Now, I was an attorney. Most people knew me as a lawyer in the Attorney General's office in Colorado, knew I did legal reviews of contracts. I think I'd done some training for the local association. And so when I got to the last page that talked about the legal review of contracts, I saw an image that said monkey mall. And that caused me a little pause. And I said, monkey mall on the legal review page. What, Sue, could you explain to me what that is? And her story was that she stuck to it to this day was, people kind of knew that was in there, and we wanted to make sure they kept looking. So they went to the back, and I kind of looked at her and said, okay, yes, Sue, that's your story. You're sticking to it. So I would like you to update it, because a few years ago, I had contacted you because I was using this when I'd go out to chapters and talk about it, but I wanted to make sure nothing bad had happened. You hate to tell a story about seeing excellence and find out there's been a terrible thing happen, like maybe you got sued for copyright infringement by the kids. I found out you had followed. Tell us about the one boy that you learned about.
Yes, the boy that was the first prize winner that was featured on the cover was actually student of I think it was the month or the quarter for the area. The schools will they'll recognize kids who are doing really well. And I was just really surprised. I opened the paper one day and just saw his name in there, and just a little story that yes, he got an award for being a student of of some longer period. He was selected by the school, and that was really pretty exciting.
And I'm willing to put money on the fact that you probably created a procurement agent out there somewhere. We may never know; it'll happen after us. But one of the things really inspired me about the story was this whole idea of creativity and innovation. And I know we don't sometimes think we're innovative and creative, but I'll just let you all read this. It's a great quote. I was going to have Jack just intercede. Jack, if I'm guessing that art's not in your procurement manual, or you maybe haven't seen it, but what is innovation in our profession?
Well, thank you, Richard, and Sue. It's a pleasure to go after you in this session. And really, innovation and procurement is us being more than transactional. And each one of our organizations, you're gonna hear a lot from me over the next year. We've taken our organization here in the county of San Diego from a purchasing transactional organization to a professional, service-oriented, mission-focused organization. And so whether you're an individual, small team of one, head cook and bottle washer, to a larger organization like I'm part of, there's always an opportunity. And I think Sue's example is great, is what is your mission? How are you perceived in your organization, and how can you add value? Okay. Right. And not be that organization or that individual that is, oh, we got to get around procurement. We got to go through or around procurement, rather than, hey, let's ask procurement to help us on this. Let's help them. And you've heard me say this many times, Richard. My job when I get in every morning is to get my customers what they need to support the residents of San Diego County when they need it at a fair and reasonable price. And underlining that, we have to follow our policies, rules, and regulations. So I never lead with that. And maybe that's where kind of thinking, your background being from the legal counsel, sometimes not you, but other counsels will always lead with the rules that you can't do this or you can't do that. Okay, well, what can we do? What is the world? And then that gets into the art of creativity. I call it legal creativity. All right. It is legally allowed. So with that, I'll kind of end my comments for now.
And you said something that I wanted to build on with Sue. Even you talked about mission, and I know when you went out, one of the things my principles is help the team keep purpose in mind. And I know you were going around to Ike Holland, your I guess the county manager, I guess that would be, or your boss at least, and the other two departments. What was the purpose that you all were trying to achieve with this project? Just curious.
Well, we had put together a new procurement manual, and it was long, comprehensive, and we wanted people to read it. And part of the way that you can get people to look at things, I guess, or to read things, is that if they have a stake in it themselves. And so, knowing that IT would help us, getting this whole thing produced, and also our administrative services team, we knew that they would be encouraged to read through the manual, and if they could get excited about it, they would let others in the county know also. And so, our purpose was, we actually had a couple of purposes. First of all, to educate our own employees about it, get them excited about it, and use the manual. And then also, again, we were hoping to let the public know a little bit more about procurement and how it worked. And if we started with some of with the younger kids, as you mentioned, maybe there is one of them that would grow up to be a procurement manager someday. Just things that, kind of a career development day, along with that. So we had a couple of purposes in mind, but basically it was to, educate everyone about that, and get people kind of excited about procurement, and knowing that it wasn't, as Jack said, that you just don't want to go around procurement. You want to work with them.
Yeah. And, Jack also brought up the idea of transactions. And I know that this has been on everybody's mind, and they're probably having trouble paying attention because they want to know the answer to this, because you selected, I know, winners, a third and a second and a first. But from a transactional perspective, there were no bid protests either, right?
No.
Okay. So, when we talked about, when people probably don't know, we talk about these things in advance just to get a feel for perspectives. And one of the other guiding principles that I usually use is step to their side often in order to promote collaboration and feedback. And that's kind of my empathy piece. And you had an interesting perspective, I thought, on the role of empathy in lateral leadership in teams. What is the empathy piece?
I think, with the empathy, you can't be insensitive to your suppliers, your clients, or whoever, members of your team, or those that you provide service to. It's just important to take everything seriously. Take people's needs seriously. The more you can empathize with them, the easier it is to build trust, and it just makes it easier to work with people.
As you scale out and you get into larger teams, and some people will never want to have a large organization, but you'll sometimes feel that or see a little bit of changes in context that require different approaches to things. I don't remember where Laura Shelters first came up with this. I turned it into a nice slide. It's been fairly popular in terms of leadership principles. A few things on here that helped me actually inform me about knowing about Jack and knowing about Sue and the way they operate. But the good parts about this is they use verbs, and they're not just a list of traits. They're things to do to help you be more effective. And it like practice empathy, the thing we just talked about, and communicate, and these essential types of skills. This starts to inform or get us start thinking about broader context. A couple things on here, especially as you go into larger organizations. Take time to emotionally recharge. Well, the bottom bullet, practice humility. There's a great author I love. His name is Edmure Shine. He's a professor emeritus out of Stanford, who's got his most recent book is Humble Leadership. And it's not a humility in the social status sense. What it is humility in the sense of learning and not feeling like you've got all the answers, like Thomas Lindley did when he went out and went to engage people and just ask them questions about what their frustrations were, and didn't act like he had all the answers, and engage them. So this slide, I think, is a terrific slide to start you thinking, not just team leadership, but also as you start to move a little bit more broadly. I found San Diego County, like I did many of the stories, by seeing awards that were done. And I recall that I saw that San Diego County, their procurement office had won the Innovation Award from NIGP. And you're getting a sense already from just hearing Jack talk about what that was about and why. You know, Jack had come like I had really from some federal experience. He'd been on the supplier side in the Air Force. He had been in the county before, took a little hiatus with industry, came back to the county, and was fortunate because he's the first one to say it. He had a terrific boss, and they were just so supportive of what he was trying to achieve. And I think what he was facing is a couple of things. One is people in the organization, as you speak to Jack, knew they wanted to get better. I mean, I think they felt like there were things they could do to improve. They were kind of in a transactional environment a little bit, I think, as I've talked, and he'll correct my work too on this, but they largely kind of followed a linear approach on requisitions coming in, farming them out, you know, handling the work, the transactional work that's involved in the procurement, but didn't really have the customer part. And so, as I usually had done in stories, when I'd see an award like that, and then subsequently realized they had gotten the OA4, the Achievement and Excellence Award, and the newest award, I wanted to see the backstory. And so Jack and I spoke, and eventually came up with an article that's in the February-March 2017 edition of Government Procurement. And just to take a couple minutes and read these quotes. I'm going to have Jack just elaborate now on what he means on as we have a little conversation on this, but a couple things. Procurements are more of a team endeavor now. And I'm guessing that's internally, but I think they brought in other stakeholders as part of this so that customers now understand the willingness to be open to their perspectives on things. And what he's done with the customer centric approach that they won the award for, and he's since evolved, is built on that by having people develop relationships more like internal consultants, so they get to know the business of the customer. So Jack, that's the first question I'll just ask you. Correct my work. So far, what I've said, was it okay?
Yes, absolutely. And we have evolved, and we continue to evolve. And maybe because I came from the private sector, and too often in the federal space, you know, the government was pursuing our solutions, but they were dictating to us how to do it, or in some ways we had some good ideas that could be transformative in how we solve the problems, but they already written their mind made up, and that was reflected in a procurement, and they got what they asked for, not what the reality could have been. So that was part of what we kind of evolved to. We asked for, we do industry days. It's not just a matter of routine now. We truly do market research. We get out regularly. We listen to all input, and we use. When I came to this organization, we didn't use our request for information tool that frequently, because I don't know why we didn't, but now we've more than doubled or tripled that. The time where we will go out, you know, our departments feel more comfortable in asking the experts in the industry, you know, what is the realm of what's out there now? And we do still have very, very strong double yellow lines around our procurement process, and when, you know, when there would be, you know, what those lines are. But for us to do true market research, supplier, and have inputs as we're developing our procurement process has been really helpful for us. We've gained both internal trust as well as trust with contractors and providers, because too often we would send out an RFP and I'd only get a couple or three responses, and I go, well, why is that? Well, we inadvertently overspecified something, or we missed the marketplace. The market had moved on, and we were still responding, our contracts are usually 5 years in duration, but we were responding with a requirement that was 5 years plus old, rather than what the state of the marketplace was. So those are some of the things. And by the way, metrics are all part of how we evolve. We use metrics to benchmark ourselves, both metrics that I published for the community members so they can understand what our procurement business is. How many, what is procurement in the community of San Diego, and also procurement metrics on ourselves. For example, my protests, I track that annually. My protests this year are down. And I would say why we are doing a better job of explaining the process to prospective contractors, and also what our selection criteria was. So they don't need the protest to find out that they had a fair shake, and we made a best value selection. So that's just a little bit of specific examples there.
Well, you'd already talked about the helping part, which is in the title here, really the choose to help. I did want to drill down a little bit on questions, because you've mentioned metrics, and as I recall, one of the things you're doing more effectively is asking questions of internal stakeholders too. I mean, in terms of that, how has that evolved? And that's part of your metrics, I think you track, isn't it, on customer satisfaction? Yeah, tell us about that.
Right. And just that, annually or we try not to do it like anything else. If you do a customer satisfaction survey too frequently, it's kind of like when you go to a hotel. Sometimes you check out, or when we used to go to hotels before the pandemic, before you even checked out of the hotel, you get an email saying, well, rate our visit. You're like, really? So but when we do check in and ask for that feedback, a real important metric to us is, are you getting our engagement strategically to help you strategically plan for your procurement to get you what you need? And that is, I'll call it an open dialogue. And in some cases, we open the session, you open the session about talking about being a leader. Leading is being both a good listener, you said that in one of the charts, as well as being comfortable enough to propose alternatives to customers, even though they may have their mind made up because of their prior experience, but sharing that in a comfortable way and saying, hey, this is how I think maybe we could do this a little bit better. I found a very positive reaction to that from our customers.
Yeah. Sue, I'd like to just ask you a question on this too. Jack brought up the idea of suppliers, and I thought you had an interesting perspective. You're in a one-person shop now, and I remember asking you, where do the suppliers fit into this whole team thing from your perspective? Nobody works for you, but you're having to achieve. Share your response to me on that. I thought it was a lot of insight.
Well, I really consider myself, part of the overall team, as far as if I'm working with a supplier or one of our tenants. We're really, those people are part of my team. And I think that if you treat them with respect, you are open to them. One of the things that I always appreciated working with Ike was that, he said, I'm not going to hover over you. He said, I know you know what to do. And he said, if you need me, I'm here. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave you alone. And, that's kind of the way I like to work with suppliers too. We'll talk, not just suppliers, but other tenants. We talk, we meet, but I'm not going to hover over them and, criticize every little thing they're doing. I want to take anything they have to tell me seriously, and cooperate with them as much as possible. Some of the government procedures can be a little bit difficult, and I just want to be able to help them through it. I think that the more you work with them, the more cooperation you get, and that word gets out. word gets out and people know that you're a good organization to work with, that word filters out. You'll get more responses to an RFP. Sometimes you'll get more positive feedback from people rather than negative. And I just think that, when you consider the larger picture, that you're really part of a team just beyond yourself or your own organization, I think that I just find that more helpful. It just makes things go a little more smoothly.
The term help is showing up so much in what both of you were talking about. I think that's terrific. Great insight, Sue. Great insight. Jack, when we spoke before, you mentioned that your teams, I think I got the quote here, are deeper into customers really now. I mean, how has that evolved?
I think how that's evolved is they have become, I've organized my organization around our groups. The way the hierarchy in our county is, we have our chief administrative office. We're organized a lot like Fortune 500 companies are. We have mission focused public safety. We have health and human services, who's my biggest customer, and then I have the government finance group, where general services is, and support services. That's where I'm a member of. But by organizing my teams around those critical mission functions in our county has allowed our teams to understand the recurring business with that practice, if you will, with that customer. Obviously, public safety and what they need, supporting our sheriff and our fire authority and those types of functions. Of what we're buying, sheriff vehicles, helicopters, some kind of cool stuff, fire equipment for our backcountry, is different than buying or procuring social services from nonprofit organizations within our community. So by focusing those teams, those staff that are supporting those customers become intimately familiar with their business in a positive way. So we're not, every time I have a customer that has a need, they have some natural background because they've been involved with that customer in the past. So it's not just coming in and then the customer has to re-educate a new procurement individual on what their business is. So it's really become, and there's a mutual respect, almost I'll call it a friendship between the organization, because they become familiar with each other. They know what my staff expects. If they want to try to justify a single source, they know we're going to say, well, what's the justification for that? Not just, they know what they can anticipate the questions that we have in the procurement process.
I don't know that you answered the question on chat about how many types of leadership roles are you in, but I'm guessing you're in a team on an executive level. You lead a team that's small, that has your chief deputies. You're a formal leader of an organization of over 50. So you've really experienced the various dimensions of team leadership and organizational leadership. If you had to, and I've touched on the 5 leadership lateral leadership principles, and I'm just curious, your perspective, how has leadership changed for you as you move from a team level to a larger organization? And I think the sub question is, do those leadership principles that govern good, effective team lateral leadership apply in a larger organization to you?
Absolutely. And I did put in the chat early on, my answers to that poll were all. There are times where I'm a team member. As you know, we're doing, our board of supervisors now is running some subcommittees, and I'm a contributor as one of the represented departments as part of that subcommittee. And then, quite honestly, when I go out to the community to do our more targeted outreach, we're really trying to get more community engagement by underrepresented organizations that never wanted to do business with the government because maybe there were perceived barriers or actual barriers to doing business with us. When I go out, I do more listening than I do talking, and understand what is their perspective. Why wouldn't they provide a proposal to us? Listening to them. Well, what is it about our insurance requirements that is a barrier to them, or what are they concerned about? And so it really is some of all of that each and every day. And like today, I'll transition in different types of leadership roles on different teams, probably 5 times today in 5 different capacities.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed, I think, when I got in a large organization is the intimacy you have in a smaller group, a team environment. When you're just a team, that's challenging when you get to have 60 or 70 people or larger, because then you're depending on the people that you work with on your smaller executive team to sort of set those conditions. I'm just curious, Sue, we're at the hour and we're going to still move on a little bit. Some people may drop off, but did that generate any thoughts for you from your perspective as a team of one right now? Or you've been a team of one? Anything that Jack said that you went, yeah, I get that? I'm just curious.
I think, especially when he said that he does a lot more listening than talking when he goes out into the community, that is so important. And when I am listening to someone who's got some concerns, I may have to give the answer 3 or 4 times. Maybe follow-up emails or something like that, but. Government can be difficult sometimes for them. There's someone who has not worked in government. They need to work through the government system, and you're there to help them. I think that that's so important to listen to what maybe they're confused on or need help with. And it's because, we're so used to doing everything every day, and we don't realize that they don't have that same experience. So I think it is really important to do a lot of listening and just help them through those steps.
Let's just talk about adaptability a little bit. We're in a year now when the whole context for what we do has changed. And there's a term that we learned from Dan Price, my colleague, teaches this, and a lot of you have heard of this. It's called VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And guess what? We're in a VUCA world, right? Right now. What have you had to do to adapt your leadership style and kind of how you operate given the change in the environment? Just curious.
It has been interesting because, for a long time, you really couldn't meet in person with people. So I've made a lot more phone calls probably than I ever did, and have done a lot more emails as far as, and not just emails that are kind of, boilerplate emails, kind of trying to really just target it to whatever that person or that person needs, and kind of get rid of all the fluff and that. So I have just tried to keep in touch a lot more one way or another, and I think that has helped. I don't know. I think that now it's we have the chance to get out a bit more and actually go out and see people face to face. But it was difficult during the pandemic, and I met face to face with people when we could. But I would say that a lot more was done remotely, and so it just kind of forced you to try and communicate maybe more often and a more targeted communication.
We people are still suffering. Obviously, families are still suffering, and there's still a lot of disease around, and so let's not lose sight of that. But sometimes contexts change and they become opportunities. And I know when I talked with Jack, I was surprised. Your adaptability challenge was probably a challenge on one hand and an opportunity in another, and it had to do with the response, right? Tell us about that? People be interested.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Sue said as far as I talk more on the phone than I probably ever would have. And there's shorter calls, and some of those calls are just checking in, saying hi, or I'm going to follow up with you, and here's when. But one of the opportunities came about, Richard, which was, to use this medium, whether it be Zoom or Teams or, there were several. We've kind of, most people are most comfortable with Zoom suppliers, but having the opportunity, it actually, our bidders conferences before the pandemic, if I think about it, for a contractor to come to a bidders conference, it would take a half a day out of their work schedule. All right. And they should be doing they have to make priority decisions, working on their current projects or not, versus taking a half a day to come to our bidders conference. What I've found is we've actually got more participation because everything is our bidders conference or via Zoom now. And I expect that to continue as we go further. We will always give an opportunity to be in person because part of our human condition is human interaction. I miss it. I miss shaking hands with people. I miss looking someone in the eye, and talking to them and getting to know them. It's not the same over Zoom, but I do see it as an opportunity for organizations that may not have made that priority decision to come and consider a new opportunity with us. They can now do that reasonably and take an hour or half an hour out of their day. So,
and we're missing the opportunity that's on the slide now, which is kind of the personal, touching and the ability to really communicate as humans to one another in that way. And I'd like to put this up because as we kind of move towards the end now, and connect some of the dots on this, I think if I had to pick the 5 principles I'm going to show you here in a little bit, it's the ability to be inquisitive and to ask questions. And of course, the flip side of that, to listen to them. These were 3 that I have found effective and heard people do effective. Can you just help me understand in a meeting if you don't understand, or a team? Just trying to get a better feeling for the perspective. What if? The ability to think ahead. Especially important, I think, now as we adjust processes to a changing environment. What if we actually don't have to have manual signatures on all our contracts? What is the worst that will happen? And the final one is I think just engaging people, letting them be part of a solution, which is, asking them, what do you think? When somebody years ago had asked me if, come up with some principles in terms of small group leadership. And these are not complete, but I think these are probably some that are going to apply no matter what size of organization you're in. And you can do this as a person on a team, not necessarily the leader of the team, but help the team keep purpose in mind. The best question I ever heard in a meeting once was somebody who was not a leader just say, when, at the end, they always say, does anybody have anything else? And somebody raised their hand and said, yeah, I have a question. And how will we know we succeeded? Which really gets you into so many things, even measurement and just defining the purpose. Use questions effectively to kind of help the team learn. Use just enough structure. I always say that it's become a joke among my colleagues now. There's another part of this I don't put in it, but it's not too much structure. You don't need, 50-page charters on a 3-week project to do something, but emails sometimes are fine, or exchanging emails on team norms. I mean, I do that sometimes. If I don't know people, just say, hey, here's how I like to operate. I'll try to get back to you within 24 hours and let you know when I'll get to your question, or using just enough structure. A little bit of project management goes a long way, and that's why the book really soft pedaled the formal aspects of project management, but raised the importance of using just enough structure to help organize thinking and action. And step to their side often. We've used the term empathy, and I think just trying to find out where people are on things. It's harder in this environment. Victor Lemer and Barb Johnson and some of the team that are teaching all us about training on Zoom and things, they're using effectively that initial part on meetings where you just get to talk, find out, what is more important you should be doing than being in this meeting with me. Just a question like that to check in with people, but step to people's side often. And finally, commit your time and attention enthusiastically. This is actually the bullet when I tell Sue's story. She spent a lot of time doing this, and she was enthusiastic about it. And the word that was on this slide that isn't in the book that I added later, and I put it in, was enthusiasm, and just finding a passion for what you do in a team, and just being enthusiastic in what you do. You end this with what is in the last 2 pages of the book, Seeing Excellence. This is one that it's a personal challenge to each of you, and it's called Find the Gap. And this isn't rocket science. And I've heard Jack use the term the gap. I've heard many of the leaders in this profession learn the gap or use the term. That is, think of a stakeholder, a customer. I love the word customer, or a supplier that needs some help, or that the relationship is struggling a little. And find somebody in your office. Don't just do this alone. Find somebody else that's like thinking. May not be anybody that even deals with the customer, but just somebody that can be with you and just talk about the fact you're going to go find the gap. And don't just pick up the phone and call. We're now getting to the point where we don't necessarily have to use Zoom, and that we may be able to be in a room with people, but call and say, I'd like to come and just visit. There's a Japanese term called Gemba in the Toyota production system. It's well known and taught in Lean. It's the place. Go to the place. I used to do this as a criminal defense attorney. Terrible analogy, but I'd go and just see I just learned so much just being there, and go to where the client is. And then when you get there, ask this question to start it after the introductions. What's one thing I can do or stop doing to help you better succeed? And what I'll guarantee you is that the conversation won't end there. And you'll have something that with your colleague, as you're walking back to the office, you can talk about the gap and maybe some ideas on one thing to do to start closing the gap. And then go talk to your supervisor, your manager, maybe go and share the gap with people in the organization. And most of all, do something to start closing it and communicate. Go find the gap. I'll stop here. I know I can tell from body language on Zoom that Jack was thinking something here. I could see as I did that. Probably Sue also. I can't see her, but just feeling it.
Sue, I'm going to let you go first, and then I'll.
You go. Uh-oh.
Well, I agree when you said find the gap. That is so important. It is really easy, especially this past year, since everyone's been kind of hampered by the pandemic, that you can kind of hide behind email. And you do your best with email, but there's nothing like meeting with people in person. It just makes all the difference. It reinforces to them that you do care enough to come out and see them, and that you are concerned. And it's just a great way to kind of break those barriers down.
Yeah.
We'll echo that. Matter of fact, in our journey, Richard, when you first met me and we started talking about customer service, we were an organization that we never went to our customers' locations. And so we started to go out to our customers and sit with them, ask them to invite us to their staff meeting occasionally. And let's talk about their procurement challenges in the first 15 minutes of their staff meeting. What? You want to come to my staff meeting? Yeah. And an amazing thing happened. We were doing procurement planning without calling a procurement planning meeting, because we were listening to what they were basically planning, and we would say, oh, well, you're probably going to need a contract for that, right? And they go, oh, yeah, glad you're here, purchasing. Can you help us with that?
You know, we've got some people I think that are leaving, and I wanted to say thank you first, and then we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A that we got a few minutes if people can stay. But I want to thank you for joining us on this. There are some stories that are timeless. This one is a timeless story that she brought, and Jack, for all that you bring and helping us between the two of you, framing between leadership at a small group team level, and then larger organizational leadership. And so I don't have the big voice board where I can show everybody applaud, but I want to thank you for that. If you can stay a couple minutes, we'll take anything else in the Q&A. I've got a couple questions. One is, what strategies, let's do this one first. What strategies would you suggest in working with an end user who's made up their mind regarding a procurement outcome that's being issued? And I'm going to just start it by saying, I think one of the strategies is what Jack just talked about, is go learn, get to know them so that people understand the interests. And then I'll just give a shout out to the global practices that NIGP is doing. One of those just came out as stakeholder relationships, and they have got some great ideas in there. One of which is, see if you can go visit them and at a staff meeting, or ask them if they want to come to one of yours and have a relationship. Thoughts on that, either one of you, on an end user who's made their mind up on a procurement outcome? Just curious if you've got an idea.
Well, I would agree with that, with what you mentioned, Richard, because I just think that meeting in person, talking with the person, asking them, just finding out how and why they made the decision they did, or why they think that their mind is made up. You can get quite an insight into how they're thinking or how they're practicing, and that can make all the difference. I mean, you may end up changing their mind, and I just think it's so important to maintain a relationship with them.
What I would say is, you guys hit the nail on the head, but I would say it's all about how you approach that customer. It's about starting a relationship and say, oh, okay, Marco, well, that's interesting. Tell me what was behind that, or what led you to that, in such a way that, and there are times, I will tell you, that I get influenced the other way. And I go, you know what? You're right. We're not going to, your decision's right on the mark. And I'll tell you, the one time that you do that with a customer, where you agree with them, and not that you're, you should be keeping a checklist of how many times you win or lose, but that one time that you say, well, you know what, you have a good point, Marco. I think, yeah, we're on the right path. Wow, instant credibility.
Yeah,
my way.
I agree, and I was going to just say that I think that as we mentioned before, the more you listen, people will tell you. I mean, they'll go on with their story, and if you give them enough time, they'll really open up to you. And then you can avoid, like you said, just going in there and say, well, why did you make that decision? That's not exactly the greatest way to go about it. So, I think that the suggestions that you mentioned, Jack, are great, because, and then, you let the person talk, and as much as they need to, that can give you great insight.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you again. This was terrific. Exceeded my expectations, as I expected it would. So thanks, Sue. Thanks, Jack. And thanks, everybody, for participating.